feedback. So I did see in the Q&A, someone did ask if there will be an opportunity, and yes, there will. We hope to gather your feedback, and really depending upon how many participants would like to participate in that feedback, will determine how long each individual will have to speak. And then we'll do just a quick summary and closing statement towards the end. And then some quick instructions for everyone. So as you may have noticed, attendees are muted upon entry into the webinar, and video is disabled. So our team will ask you to use the raise hand control at the bottom of your screen if you wish to provide comment during the comment period. And then if you wish to ask a question, please use the Q&A control at the bottom of your screen. For the most part, we would like to keep the feedback or the comment period to suggestions and comments specifically. And then we will hopefully be able to address your questions from the Q&A following this webinar. We do have a frequently asked question sheet that is posted to the project webpage, and I'll provide that link here in just one moment. But we will periodically update that FAQ sheet. And so if any of your questions happen to be new ones or ones that we can clarify on that Q&A, that's likely where we will be able to get to your questions. And then, of course, last but not least, we just ask that you please maintain civility when speaking. Oh, sorry, I have to close a few things that are up on my screen, blocking my view. So the process schedule, the process and the current timeline is before you on this slide. So currently we are gathering community feedback on the public review draft number 2 and the amended ordinance for implementation and enforcement of short-term rentals. So we currently have an online questionnaire that is associated with those drafts. So if you haven't yet visited our project website and have seen that the draft number 2, that questionnaire is included in the documents there you'll see. And then we are having, this is our second open house essentially. So like I said earlier, we did have an open house yesterday in the Estes Valley, and then today is the webinar for the county wide outside of Estes Valley. And then public comment on the drafts are due January 30th. So that would be Monday. So if you haven't had an opportunity yet to provide written comment and you would like to, you still do have time. And that will be to our project email, which is luc2020@larimer.org. And I will have that on a screen before we close out here. But again, you have until Monday. And then the next steps, which will be essentially late January, the rest of this month, which is wrapping up rather quickly, and into February, we will provide a summary of the input received from all those email comments that we've received, including then comments from this evening and last night's open house. So we will get that summary taken care of and posted online, and that will probably be in the coming week or so. And then on January 30th, the project team will have a Board of County Commissioners work session meeting to bring the Board of County Commissioners up to date thus far and keep them apprised of what is happening and what we are hearing with the draft regulations. And then on February 3rd, we are hoping to have the final public hearing drafts available. And then on February 8th, we have a Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners work session. So that's a work session that goes in a bit more detail with both those boards. And then coming up in April, our intent is to have our first public hearing on the final public hearing drafts on March 15th. And the Planning Commission, that is the hearing on the 15th, and they will provide a recommendation then to the Board of County Commissioners, who is the approving body, on March 27th at the public hearing that day. Sorry for that shift. And then in early April, we suspect that there will be a final draft and adoption of the amended ordinance for implementation and enforcement of the short-term rental regulations. And at the bottom of your screen, that is the link to the project website. So on the project website, you will find an ongoing timeline. It's periodically updated. The current draft regulations, as well as the previous initial public discussion draft, are available on that website, as well as a bunch of previous summaries of other open houses and meetings that we've had, and all the background information, and the frequently asked question sheet as well. So moving forward with the public review draft number 2 in the enforcement ordinance, the public draft number 2 of the STR regulation includes all the current land use code standards for short-term rentals as referenced throughout the land use code. And so that is much the same as the initial public discussion draft. So it essentially builds upon that draft. And the potential changes to both documents, the ordinance as well as the draft regulations, reflect analysis and public input received on the initial public discussion draft, which took place from October 27th to November 7th. And those public comments included 180 written comments that we received through email. And then 3 groups or organizations provided their comments. And then approximately 220 webinar attendees in November. So we had a really great turnout and we received lots of feedback from the public. And a summary of those public comments can be found on the project website. And then the context and reasoning for the proposed revisions that are reflected in this public review draft number 2 was provided in a staff memo that is organized to follow the draft regulations and changes that have been proposed. And you can find that in addition to the draft so that you can have them side by side if it will help you understand what has changed. And then before we jump in, just one reminder is that the new regulations would apply only to short-term rentals applied for and approved following the adoption of the regulations, which will take place sometime likely end of March, early April. So essentially, if you have a previous approved short-term rental that is currently in operation, the new regulations would not apply. Also, I think for point of clarification based upon some comments we have received is that the Larimer County short-term rental regulations are applicable to only those properties in unincorporated Larimer County. So if your property is within city limits, so say city of Fort Collins or Loveland or Estes Park, the regulations would not be applicable to your property. So real quickly, just to give you, if you're not familiar with the draft or if need a refresher, so we have 2 versions online. So we have a red line version that shows the edits as you see here, and we also have a clean version. So when looking at the red line version, which is most helpful to show you what has changed and what's new, what's old, here are a bit of pointers. And so when I show the draft document here in a moment, this might be helpful. So notes or points of clarification are noted in a cream colored box, such as here. And then proposed changes are indicated in blue font with a strikeout for changes or removals, and new additions are underlined, as you see here. So I will go ahead and I'm going to switch screens real quickly, but so everybody knows how we are going to proceed, I will go ahead and show the draft STR regulations first, and I will quickly walk through the main points or changes. And then once I'm complete with that, Amy White, our code compliance supervisor, will go over the enforcement ordinance. And then following that, I'll switch back. I'll have 2 additional slides, and then we will open it up for public comment. So bear with me, sorry, just one moment. Okay, so before you, if you are not familiar, this is what the draft regulations or the red line versions look like. Like I said, much of this is likely very familiar to a lot of you if you saw the initial public discussion draft, so this builds upon that draft. I'm going to just pass along the first 2 pages because this just gives you an introduction and overview, and then into the 3rd page, which hopefully you can all see this okay. Let me know if I need to scroll in. The first sections here, we have new and revised definitions, and so I will quickly just touch upon a few of the things that have changed. So from what proceeded from our earlier versions, we had a new definition for bed and breakfast inn. We have just provided some additions, which include maximum number of guests. So that is the significant change with the bed and breakfast inn. So you'll note that here that bed and breakfast inn would be limited to 20 or fewer guests. And then with short-term rentals, in the previous draft, there are 2 things that have changed. We previously and currently with Willamette County Land Use Code, short-term rental regulations have two types of short-term rentals. There are small and larges based upon occupancy. This new draft eliminates the large STR option and only allows small short-term rentals. So that would be a maximum number of 10 occupants. The other change from the previous draft is that we had permit types. So we had a full permit and a limited permit. Based upon the number of, or the feedback that we received on that, we went ahead and removed the limited option as it was not a popular concept. And then short-term rental hosted, which was replacing our current bed and breakfast definition, which was the principal dwelling was occupied by a full-time resident or owner while the guests were on site. We have defined then two types, a small hosted short-term rental as well as a large hosted short-term rental. So small would be 1 to 10 occupants, while a large would be 11 to 16 occupants. And then moving forward, into the next section of the land use code, some of these things are mainly just cleaning up definitions and what have you, as you see here. So I will just proceed along into the following pages. And the next section gets into the table of allowed principal uses. These are the county-wide tables. So you'll note that the draft number 2 does not change where STRs are allowed not allowed within the county. However, it does propose changes to the review procedures. So you'll see, as for instance here with the hosted short-term rental large, we did update or revise the approval process from administrative special review to special review. However, the zone districts where it is allowed did not change. And so again, you'll see the STR maximum occupancy of 10. We did make some modifications to the approval process based upon zone district. So that is the rural zone districts, and the chart below will be the urban zone districts. And again, you'll see slight modifications in some of the approval processes, in some cases making it a bit more of a lengthy process, whereas then in others, making it a faster process. Moving forward, into the next few pages, then get into the Estes Valley planning area. And you'll note that there are some changes very similar. I'm not changing where specifically they are allowed, but the approval process. And I won't dive too deeply into the Estes, but you will see those changes here. And then moving into the next portions, this then gets into the specific use standards for Larimer County, including the Estes Valley. So these are the standards that are applicable to all short-term rentals. The first section of section 335A would be for the hosted short-term rentals. And then 335B would be for short-term rentals. And many of you may be familiar with these. So off the bat, one of the changes you will see is in the total occupancy, and for the purposes of determining the potential number of occupants, we went ahead and added this modification, which actually reflects current practice. And so previously, as you may have known, in order to determine the potential number of occupants, the number of bedrooms is multiplied by 2. But current practice, we also currently allow 1 additional sleeping area, such as a living room, loft, or similar, as long as it meets building code requirements for a bedroom, which allows 2 additional occupants. So we went ahead and clarified that. And then the next key thing that you may notice is that we reorganized the list of standards so that it's a bit better to read and easier to follow. And then we also provided subcategories. So the first subcategory will be our general standards. And going into the general standards, many of these options were pulled over from the initial discussion draft, so I won't necessarily touch upon those. But in item C, you will note this is actually a new addition to this draft where we created a minimum separation for short-term rentals. So as it states, a short-term rental must be a minimum of 500 feet from another short-term rental, and this minimum separation distance is measured from property line to property line. And this would not be applicable if you happen to be in the Estes Valley in our accommodation zone districts. And then moving forward, there's some, like I said, lots of these actually pulled over from the previous draft, including no overnight staying in motor vehicles, as well as short-term rentals cannot be used as event spaces. And then we go into the ordinance for implementation and enforcement of short-term rentals. And this again reflects much of what was in the October draft. And Amy will touch upon that ordinance here in just one moment. And then into the life safety standards, one of the significant changes that is noted here is that in previous and current regulation, a property manager currently is required to be located within 1 hour or less travel distance from the short-term rental. With this draft, we did propose a reduction in that time to 30 minutes. And then next up, the item N did carry over from the previous draft. And then we have a few other items here as we move along that again came from the previous draft as well, which had to do with, solid fuel burning, solid fuel burning exterior appliances. This in a previous draft, we had indicated that if the property was in a wildfire hazard area, they could not have solid fuel burning appliances. However, with this draft, we went ahead and made it so that solid fuel burning appliances are not allowed countywide on short-term rental properties. And then again, many of the safety standards that carried over included the telephone for emergency services. And then we jump into the floodplain overlay district standards. This did change from the previous draft. We are moving forward based upon conversations we had with our Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners. It was recommended that short-term rental structures and any portion of the primary access route, including a driveway and any portion of the primary parking, shall not be located within the floodplain overlay district zone AE, which is a floodway, nor within the floodplain overlay FPO district AE, which is a flood fringe. So that was a significant change from the last draft. And then in addition to that, if the short-term rental is located adjacent to a floodplain or floodway or flood fringe, the operations manual shall include information pertaining to that, and including proper egress from the property. And then local roadways, you'll see that this is actually a significant change as well. The previous draft provided a bit more specifications. We went ahead and scaled back based upon the feedback we received from the public as well as our engineering department. And so this makes it more specific to Appendix G, so it does scale it back. And then in the following section, the life safety inspection and license renewal, there have been some changes here. Before, as is current operation, but we clarified here before operating a short-term rental, the short-term rental first must undergo and pass a life safety inspection. But the most significant component is that a short-term rental license shall be renewed every other year and shall be re-inspected by the building department every 4 years, accompanying every other renewal to ensure compliance, unless there has been a change to the building. And then during the years when a reinspection is not required, the property owner or operator shall self-certify that the short-term rental remains in compliance with the regulations. And I will provide one point of clarification just based upon some of the questions we have received, is that when the building division does the license renewal inspections, it will be to see if anything has changed or been added to the structure. If nothing changed, there will be no new requirements from the building code. The reinspection will ensure that the STR remains in compliance with the safety standards that I previously touched upon. So that would be in section 335B and its letters L through S. So that was in just about 2 sections before that I had covered. So that covers such things as the operations manual, fire extinguishers, the anti-tip device on the stove, those types of safety and standards rather than life safety that is correlated with the building division and their inspection. So that one point of clarification is very important to understand. And then moving along, and the standards, we did in this this draft did modify the transfer of short-term rental license. We did receive a slew of feedback on transfer of license from not people or the public not wanting transfer of license to allowing it completely or making exceptions for family transfer. So we explored many options and found that the family transfer exemption if that was possible, and did not find a legal way to allow that. So we did develop these regulations with by comparison of the Estes Park, which was very helpful, and hope that this creates more of a balance for the different perspectives and feedback that we did receive. So you'll note that transfer of license would be allowed for all previously approved short-term rentals prior to an adoption date. So that is an effective date of these regulations. So this would likely be sometime April or late March. Any new short-term rental license that came that were applied for and became approved and active following the adoption of these licenses would not be transferable. And then if a property in this section BB, if a property in section Z above is allowed to transfer, then the new property owners would be required to provide notification to the county within 60 days. And so this is new information as of this draft. So overall, that covers the standards, the specific use standards for all short-term rentals. The next following page that is before you is specific to the Estes Valley, and that touches upon their vacation home standards and as well as the existing cap. So there are suggested revisions there, but again, I won't go into too many details. And then the remainder of the document is just, again, pulled over from the previous draft. And then just before I hand it over to Amy, I just wanted to touch upon one other item that is not included in the draft, but has led to some questions. There has been conversation and questions brought up about exemption of certain HOAs or communities from the STR regulations. And just for those of you who are interested in that topic, we have had ongoing conversations with staff about those specific options, and we are still considering and seeing what options are available, if any. So that is an ongoing conversation that we hope to have clarified by the public hearing drafts. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch my screen real quickly, and Amy will step in to go over the ordinance for implementation and enforcement.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So as Ton has mentioned, in conjunction with the proposed short-term rental regulations, we're also taking a look at the ordinance. There's a couple changes that I want to bring everybody's attention to. Ton, if you can go to page 2. We put in a little bit more information about the purpose and the intent. If you can scroll down just a touch more. Yeah. So to talk about the vacation home and how that's going to transfer over eventually. The county attorneys, if you can scroll down a little bit more to section 5. Our county attorneys asked us to put in some language about indemnification, so that's in there as well. And by adding that section, I didn't catch that it changes the sections later on, so we'll be amending that in the second draft. And then if you could go to page 3, Ton. One of the big things that we're doing with this is there at section 7B. Previously, we were getting the planning approval and then the change of occupancy from a single family residence to the short-term rental. And then if there was some sort of revocation on the 3 strikes and you're out that's already in the ordinance, we were revoking the approval rather than a license. So the whole purpose of this section is to take the planning approval and the certificate of occupancy for the short-term rental, and that's going to create a license. And if revocation does occur, you would be revoking the license rather than the planning approval. And then down a little bit more, we address in section E there, when we get notified of an illegal home that's operating as a short-term rental, we send out our cease and desist letter, and what that, if they don't respond to that, then we've been taking them to court immediately, to county court, and getting some action that way. The other thing we're trying to get to here is in F. Some people, once they come in and learn what the process is to become a short-term rental, what that approval process looks like, they opt not to go through the process. And if that's the case, their advertising has to clearly indicate in the banner heading that this is for 30 days or more. So we know we're getting a lot of folks that are saying, oh yeah, we don't want to go through this, but wink, wink on the side, they're still allowing people to stay. So hopefully we can get this. And the third-party vendor that we have a contract with will be able to identify these that are operating without approval a little bit better. So that's the intent there. And then if you can go to page 4, please. So we will renew, as Tom says, every other year. And on the 4th year, during that reinspection period, when the building inspectors are going to be in there for the life safety inspections per the building code, at this time, we're also going to make the non-conforming vacation homes come into compliance with the safety standards of the land use code. And the reason for that is when they were approved under the old Estes Valley Development Code, there were like 7 things that they looked at. Dark sky lighting, number of bedrooms, number of parking spaces, whether there was unpermitted work, if they had their license hanging in, and if they had the property lines. So it was very minimal. And what we're not getting complaints right now, but we do get several phone calls asking why the vacation homes can use their fire pits, and it's because it's not illegal, because they didn't have that regulation previously. So we're hoping to bring everybody and have everybody play on that same level playing field. We put in some, our third-party vendor again is having trouble. Some people are putting their approval number down in the bottom of the verbiage. Some are putting it on the second page. So we're making the requirement that that approval number, the license number that will be coming, needs to be in the banner headline so that the third-party vendor can pick those out easier. We also put in about the noise ordinance that that is enforced by the health department and the sheriff's office. Part of, it's not in the ordinance, but another piece that we've taken is this third-party vendor that I refer to. We are taking steps. If they get a complaint on the hotline, they will immediately contact the property manager, who is ultimately responsible for dealing with any kind of issue complaint that people have. So it's the property manager that's that first point of contact. So we put a little bit of that in, and the property manager further down will then have to report to code compliance within 48. I get an email when a complaint comes in, so I will know that a complaint has been filed. And then the property manager needs to provide us with a report on how they mitigated that complaint at that time. We've also had several incidents where people, in addition to the maximum occupancy in the structure, are bringing on RVs or tents or whatever. So we've identified that specifically. There's concerns about people feeding wildlife. That's not code compliance. We don't enforce that, but the U.S. Wildlife Department does. Same with the fire. If there's a fire, you don't want to be calling code compliance. You want to contact the fire department. And also on the back end, we've been coordinating with these other jurisdictions so that if they do respond and it's a substantiated complaint, that will count as a strike against the revocation. Next page, please. Yeah, we put in there that, you know, if you have an egregious or a severe life safety concern, those might not, you know, at our discretion, we may be able to revoke that without the process. So that's just something, you know, if somebody's got a big wildfire in the middle, a bonfire going in the middle of a fire ban, that might take a little bit different action. And then down a little bit, please, Ton. And then this next one is where we require the property manager to contact us within 48 hours of the steps taken to mitigate the issue. And then on page 7, if you would, Ton. We've also instituted some penalty through the, so it's $1,000 per violation per day as long as the violation continues. And those are really the major highlights. We've had some suggestions about the 30-minute response time that we're looking at, coming up with possibly some different language around that. But that's pretty much the ordinance and the highlights of what's changed in that.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and switch back my screen to a couple more slides in the PowerPoint, and then we will be opening up for public comment. So the public feedback comment period, which we will be moving into, just some basic comment standards or instructions, if you will. So each participant will be given one opportunity to comment, and each participant will be given a specific amount of time to comment based on the number of individuals participating in the comment period. So here in just a moment, we'll ask those of you who would like to provide comment to raise your hand, and then we'll get a general idea of what, based upon the time frame that we have and how much that leaves us for each comment. And the more specific you can be in your feedback, the more helpful. So if you have had an opportunity to look at the draft regulations, if there is specific language in there that is standing out to you or needs to be improved or scaled back, whatever it may be, the more specific is great. And then if you have specific questions, please provide those again in the Q&A control rather than asking them during the comment period, because we do want to make sure that we get everybody's feedback. That would be appreciated. And then, like I said earlier on, we will do what we can to address those Q&A following the webinar in our frequently asked questions sheet that is online. So we do try to keep that up to date, and then we will go through your questions, and anything that hasn't been asked already, we will go ahead and add that to the frequently asked questions. So we do appreciate your understanding and wanting us to keep the feedback opportunity open for feedback. And then alternatively, if you do have feedback or suggestions, you are free and happy to email them to me at our project web or email, which is the luc2020@larimer.org. So with that, I think I will stop sharing my screen, and then I think I'll give it over to Leslie and maybe Matt.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, everybody. So if you are online and interested in making comments, what we'll do is invite you in to speak in the order of hands raised that we see here. And so I see some hands going up, and we'll just let you know who's up next and then who's on deck after that. And then we'll run a timer so that you know when your 2 minutes are up. At this point, I only see 6 hands raised. So if that's the case, we can probably give a little bit more time. If you think you might want to make comments, please raise your hand so we can gauge how many people are interested And if we don't have too many, we can probably go with 3 minutes or a little bit more time. If you change your mind, you can always lower your hand too. So go ahead and raise your hands. We'll just give everybody another minute or two, and then we'll invite you in, starting with Cheryl Pogue, and then Tom Moretti, and then Diana Clements after that. So we'll go ahead and open it up to Cheryl, and we'll go with 3 minutes for each of you. So Cheryl, you should be able to unmute your microphone and let us know what your comments are.
Okay, I have a couple. I'll make them quick. First of all, I'm the president of the Crystal Lakes Road and Recreation Association. Therefore, the questions I'm asking are relative to that entity. We have parking concerns because with these large 10 group occupancies, based on what you're showing, a lot of driveways can't accommodate that. And we do not allow street parking because our roads are not wide enough. So we would need you to take that into account when you're giving a permit. The second thing that I'm concerned about, I couldn't read on your sign what the max occupancies are for the 1-1 zoning or R&R zoning. I'll have to check that out. But the other thing that I'm quite concerned about is that we feel that you probably need more inspections in a wildfire hazard area, because sometimes these properties and overgrowth happen very quickly. And if you wait 4 years, we're going to be too far down the bad path with these kinds of issues. So fire hazard and fire safety will be lost on an exterior side without more frequent inspections. The second thing is I didn't see anything in your presentation regarding to septic system design to meet the occupancy that you're allowing and our water limits from our wells, or in some cases from our water and sewer district. So those issues have to be addressed as well. And a big one you mentioned towards the end is you're putting a lot of unfunded responsibility on our project manager without our approval. We're not willing to pay for that, yet you're shifting a lot of that responsibility to our property manager, our general manager. Why are you doing that? We should not be the end result for a lot of those issues. Period. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Let me go ahead and pull up the next person, and that's Tom Moretti, and then Diana Clements after that.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Appreciate all the work you're all doing on this. A lot of things I loved. And by the way, I'm in the Estes Valley. I could not make it last night in person, so hopped on this evening. I would say, you know, the 1 hour is terrific from an attempted resolution perspective. I love that there's a $1 penalty. I do worry quite a bit about the and the compliance side of it, the kind of the residential burden of proof being communicated effectively. In other words, if I live in an area that has 3 or 4 or 5 STRs, how do I know who to call? Do I call the one number and then the one number calls the property manager? That wasn't very clear in the documentation. It almost looked like the resident had to call the property manager. And then having the property manager as the reporting entity is a bit like having the fox watching the hen house. I don't see what or how that would be managed effectively to ensure that property managers reported that information. We know in Estes Valley that there are some property managers that are trying to skirt issues all the time. And so having them as a reporting entity within 48 hours, I think is dangerous. And then there were a number of things I put in the question window, and I guess I'll just leave those for some answers, because I think there's a lot of clarity that needs to kind of be filled in on some of these topics. The one that kind of jumped to mind was the 30-day, the long term that we're saying is 30 days or more. Is that going to be within the 500-foot limitation on the STRs? Are we going to let kind of those types of rentals in there? Or, I mean, it's okay to have a long-term rental next to a short-term rental, but when you start saying 30 more days, there's going to be a lot of people playing games with short-term rentals in those 30-day window. So I think there's got to be some additional clarity and confirmation around that. The other thing was then on the solid fuel burning ban. We've seen in our subdivision in Estes Valley, renters just throwing cigarette butts into the grass. I mean, that's a fairly common complaint that has come to the POA there. We see it, but we can't stop it. I don't know if there's any way to remedy that or put some additional language in our compliance work around that as well. So thanks again for all the work you guys are doing. I know you're taking a lot of special heat from certain organizations, especially in the Estes Valley.
All right, thank you, Tom. And you did mention the questions in the box. We'll see if we might be able to get to some of them tonight. Otherwise, we do have a frequently asked question list that we keep updated, and we will answer those at some point here in the next few weeks if we don't tonight. So thank you for your input. All right, next up we have Diana Clements, and then Justin Stiles, and then Kathy Moran after that. So Diana, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you as well from me for your time and all the work you're going into and trying to make both sides happy in all of these regulations that you're doing. And I myself mostly have questions to be answered, so you'll see me typing in a bunch of questions as I get some time here. I do have a little bit of concerns with the 1 hour turning into just 30 minutes, given if the property manager is possibly out of phone coverage or something for a little bit of time, or if they're on the mountain hiking or something. Just the 1 hour is safer. So I have a concern with that. And I am seeking more clarification on the 500-foot property line situation there and the special review. So I will send over some questions for you there. But I appreciate all you're doing here. And you'll see my questions coming through. Thank you so much.
Right, thank you. Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. All right. So we'll go to Justin Stiles and then Kathy Moran after that.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, so I guess I'll echo what the last person said on the 1 hour thing. I think that's going to cause some undue hardship to people. You still have the 3 strikes rule in effect. It doesn't make sense why you need to go to 30 minutes. So that's my comment on that. The other thing on the flood zone, I already thought you couldn't have a short-term rental flood zone. I recently applied and had to go through the whole flood review board, had to hire an engineer to prove I'm not in a flood zone to get a flood variance. So is that going to affect me? Or am I okay? That's a huge question for me because that was a huge time suck and a lot of money. The third one is the March 1st deadline. I recently got my planning approval. Now do all these new changes apply to me after the planning approval? After planning approval, all I need to do is go through the building department. So that's unclear. That doesn't make sense why we need to go from administrative special review to special review. Just because these rules changed in the middle of my application, which is already nearing completion. So I kind of need answers on that. The other things are okay with me. The wildfire. No fires at short-term rentals. I don't have an issue with that. I think a lady earlier mentioned something about 4-year inspections. I think that's for building. That's not for fire. Fire inspections are going to be every year, every 2 years. So yeah, there's just some clarity on those things that I'd really like, and it's going to directly affect me. So I don't know, how do I get my questions answered? Do I just email you at the luc2020@lerner.org and then you reply back? I'm not quite sure how that works. So I guess that's pretty much all I had for now.
All right. Thank you, Justin. And you mentioned you're in process. So I would say probably talk with your case planner about those questions, and we could get you some answers. And that would be true for any of you who have specific applications in progress. So thank you for being here. We will go to Kathy Moran and Dolores Williams and then Wayne Jeffers after that. Kathy, welcome.
Oh, hello. Thank you. I am live in the Meadowdale Hills neighborhood right outside of Estes Park. And first, I want to thank the county for all of its thoughtful work on these proposed regulations, and really especially for allowing all of the time for meaningful input from the public. We really appreciate that. I have 4 comments. The first comment, it relates to Article 3, Section 3.3.5 A, and going to the total occupancy question. And there's a parallel question, which is essentially exactly the same when you look under that same article, but B2, which just relates to short-term rentals instead of hosted short-term rentals. In determining the occupancy, it talks about the ability to have 2 additional occupants under certain circumstances beyond the 2 per bedroom. And it says in there, the language is that so long as it meets all the building code requirements for a bedroom. When you look also then under the general standards G, it talks about the requirement to meet all the wastewater system requirements. And my understanding though typically is when you're meeting wastewater system requirements, the county is looking at the number of bedrooms that there are in a building. And it has to be based on that. So if you're adding 2 additional people, I think there just needs to be clarification that by adding those people, whatever your wastewater system is, it is still in compliance then with these additional people, as if you have an additional bedroom. And the reason I say that is I know that we had some issues in the past in our neighborhood with regard to too many people being in a home and creating septic problems for the surrounding neighbors. So I think it's really important, if you're going to allow additional people beyond 2 per bedroom, that the requirement of having a septic system that also covers not just what's required for your building at the time that you build it, but that it also covers as if it were built with an additional bedroom. The second comment that I would have under the general standards would be for those neighborhoods that have protective covenants. I think there should be a requirement that if you're having an STR, it does not violate any protective covenants or restricted covenants that relate to your neighborhood. And then the third comment that I have relates to the general standards under G with looks at the water source, having enough water with regard to fire needs. The one thing I would also say is, in addition to just looking at the particular property that's seeking to become a short-term rental, I think you need to also look at what is going on in the surrounding properties. For example, in our neighborhood, the vast majority of the properties do not have wells. So someone seeking an STR might have a well, but if a fire spreads to the surrounding properties, there won't be enough water to put out the fire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was just going to see if you were ready to wrap up. It sounds like you were. So thank you for your comments. We will go to Dolores Williams and then Wayne Jeffers after that. All right, Dolores, welcome. And you may need to unmute your microphone so that we can hear you.
Okay, thanks for giving me.
There we go.
I have a cabin at Crystal Lakes, and there's a one-way out. It's a very, very concerning thing for many people. If there is an emergency, you can't even pass on some roads. I don't think this is thought through enough to allow the general public to come out for short-term rental and not knowing the area. It's generally short-term party time. And then I'm thinking you can have in this dangerous area, a cigarette butt can be thrown without any thought, because well, at party time, you really are having more fun than being serious. Forest fires are so serious. We had in Colorado, in our area, had forest fires all summer. And I think that we should really think one day, and maybe we'll wait until we have a great fire, more fires, is that short-term rentals, I don't think belong in the very far outreaches in where there is not the fire protection, there's really not the ambulance protection. And it's the wrong thing to do. I just wanted that out there as a caution. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your comments. We will go to Kathy Moran and then Wayne Jeffers after that.
It's Kathy Moran, and you already had given me my time. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I lost track there. Okay, thank you for, thanks again. Okay, so we have Wayne Jeffers and then Casey Kaiser after that.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for this forum to allow for public comment. I appreciate that. As with many other people, I'm concerned about changing from 1 hour to 30-minute response time. I think I heard one of you mention that they're working on maybe some workarounds on that and some variations. That would be much appreciated. If you're in truly a rural area, it can be hard to have a manager that's always available to actually be on site within 30 minutes with weather and road conditions and all of that. And secondly, thinking about some of the people's comments about making sure you have an adequate water source as well as septic. My understanding when I've been discussing with the building department, the Larimer County Building Department over the last couple of years, working up to getting my application ready to go, making sure my house was in order before I put in my application, was that if you've been past your permit process with the county, they've looked at your water source and your septic source. And what they take into account is number of bedrooms, 2 per bedroom plus 2. And so my understanding is that's already, if your home is permitted through the county, then that should already be taken care of and shouldn't have to be an issue that you all need to go back and look at again. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will go to Casey Kaiser and then Tara Vickery after that. And you should be able to unmute yourself, Casey.
Hi, my name is Taylor. I'm Casey's husband on her
Okay.
computer. Taylor Kaiser, and just want to thank you all for taking the time to look through these issues, respect everybody's desires to make Colorado a safer place, a place where we don't have to worry as often about wildfires and stuff like that. However, I'm an advocate against over-regulating so much of this stuff, just because I think you will all work your faces till you're blue in the face, or work your bodies till you're blue in the face, trying to come up with a perfect solution. Your lawyers know that. That's why on page 2 of the ordinance, they said you won't be held responsible if any of this stuff happens, yada, yada, yada. I just feel that while I understand what we're trying to accomplish and why these things get started, I think our time could be more wisely used if the county would sit and talk with homeowners of these short-term rentals and with the property managers and give them really good, clear guidance on how they can talk to their guests and talk to people to follow the rules and to accomplish, or to be safe with fire, to be safe with things. We own a short-term rental in Larimer County, and we see our people with their windows open while they're running the heat in the middle of negative 2 degree weather. And we just call them or text them and ask them to please close the windows or to turn the heat off, because, you know, we're just responsible homeowners. So just over regulating is actually just making it harder. And it's actually making your residents and the people in the county that are trying to make more a living for themselves, is just making it harder and harder for people to do that. And it just gets to be frustrating and overwhelming trying to keep up with all this stuff. So that's where I come from. I do understand the idea of trying to keep people safe, and I'm all for that. So that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Taylor. We will go to Tara Vickery, and then I don't see other hands up yet from people we have not heard from. So if you're interested in making comments, now's a great time to jump in and raise your hand. So Tara, and then Roger Sherman after that. Go ahead, Tari, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, first of all, I want to say thank you for taking the time. I know that the town has put in a lot of effort to hear public comments and to address the short-term rental situation in Estes Park. I have an STR. My family has owned it since the 1930s, and my uncle used to actually be the mayor of Estes Park long time ago. And one of the things that helps me and my family retain our house is through the income that we receive from our STR and Airbnb program. And I guess one of the things that I wanted to know, I appreciate the fact that I already have my license, and I understand that that's transferable now, so I appreciate that. One of the things that I had a question about is I did the life safety inspection a few years ago and had to make some modifications, but obviously my house was built in the 1930s, and there was some grandfathering in for some of the requirements of the life safety inspection. So I guess one of my questions was, are those grandfather rules or grandfather regulations going to still be applicable going forward? And then also, I know that there was a letter, and I have been kind of multitasking tonight, but I know that there was a letter submitted by EFSTRA and Matt Curtis of Smart City to I think the Planning Commission, and I'm just wondering if that was received, what the comments were, or what the feedback was from that letter. I know that there was a lot of kind of middle ground that letter raised, and so I guess I would ask that some of those recommendations that came from that letter would be considered. So again, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tari. We'll go to Roger Sherman, and then I see Jeff and Janine McGuinn after that.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Okay. Two things. One thing is that I've noticed I have a short-term rental next to our property in the Tahosa Valley, and the light's on all the time. And we would like to see more of a dark sky area. And I think in the rural areas of Larimer County, it would be nice if that would happen. Now, I understand if you have a short-term rental, you want to be able to get the short-term rental rentee there. But if we could make sure that the lighting that provides access to the property is not of a egregious nature. Secondly, one thing I haven't heard anything about, and I think I've commented on this before, is insurance. It seems to me that if you have a short-term rental, your insurance would probably go up. Now, I understand that's between the insurance company and everybody else, but my insurance agent has told me that probably my insurance rates are going to go up because I have a short-term rental nearby. And this is a concerning thing. And I would think that a short-term rental, if you're going to do that, you probably need to have a little bit extra insurance. Thank you very much for what you've been doing.
All right, thank you, Roger. We will go to Jeff and Janine McGuinn, and then if anybody else would like to share ideas with us, please raise your hand. And Jeff and or Janine.
Hi, this is Janine McGinn.
Welcome.
Thank you. We have an STR and just outside of Estes Park, just pretty near Gem Lake. And we have had this for about 15 years due to economic reasons. We couldn't stay there that frequently. So being retired now, obviously the income's essential to us like it is a lot of people that have theirs. One of the main questions, and I think, that's been addressed, was the transferability, since we've had our license first through Estes, now through Larimer. the transferability, if that transfers, is it also transferable from that person? So in perpetuity, is it transferable?
So Janine, we're not answering questions right now, but we'll, if we have some time at the end, we'll follow up on some of the
Absolutely, but that's what I would
Yeah.
like to hear.
Yep.
How that's addressed. And that really is just thanks for all your work. We want to make it a safe place, but also not be burdened and scared about a little item, you know, causing us to get revocation of our license. So hopefully there'll be tolerance as well through the county.
Okay, thank you, Janine. We'll go to, I see Mark Sigray and then Aaron Batchelder after that. And welcome, Mark. You might need to unmute your microphone so we can hear you.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I had, I was on a virtual meeting earlier today and had the same problems that I think Amy was having today, is getting in and getting the system. So there's definitely some bugs to be worked out. And that's one of my first points is I'd like to request that the meetings for the short-term rentals be held in person instead of virtually. It's hard to follow and communicate with the computer screen, harder than face-to-face. And I've requested this several times now at several of the meetings, and I know it was done for Estes Park, and we should have that same courtesy, I believe. On many occasions, I have asked also that, you know, what's the need for the regulation? You know, initially we were told at public meetings that it was for safety, and everybody here wants safety, and everybody can agree to that. But as far as like the people with cigarette butts, I mean, if you see someone throwing out a cigarette butt, by all means go after them and let them know. Or if they're driving by in a car, that's not always possible. But I'm not a smoker. I don't advocate smoking. And but you know, there's I'm sure there's people that own property as well that are smoking. So as far as the fires go, you know, if my place catches on fire by a neighbor that's short-term renting or a neighbor that lives there full time, I don't care, right? It's a fire. If we're gonna have a safety ban fires, then let's have it statewide, countywide. Let's you know, just pick out short-term rentals. And I'm not totally opposed to that, but you know, just look at the whole story. As far as the safety aspect, you know, if that's what we're doing, then let's do that for everybody. Short-term, long-term rentals, both. Let's not exclude mobile homes like we are in this. Let's not exclude motels like we are in this. And let's go for safety in personal residences too. If safety is what we're doing, then let's go after safety, and let's not create a whole new vision within Larimer County government. It looks like a lot of government overreach to me.
Mark, that's your time.
You know, one of the other things is we're given 2 minutes.
Okay, Aaron Batchelder is up, and then if anybody else would like to make comments, please raise your hand.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Hi. I realize we're not answering questions, so I'll just echo what Janine was saying. I would be concerned about the resale, being able to sell the property and pass on that voucher, I suppose, to be able to use the short-term rental. I don't have a short-term rental up there. Mine's down in Loveland, but I will say this, that the market will kind of weed out the bad ones on its own. Like, people are brutal on some of these reviews. So if you're a bad host, they will let you know. I do kind of agree with the last gentleman who was saying a bit about the overreach and the, you know, all these regulations. A lot of these people are just trying to make the, you know, a little side hustle and the money to help combat this ridiculous inflation and everything else. And then when you're making it so hard to, I don't know, when you regulate it so much, you guys are gonna almost undo what your economy is based on. I grew up in Telluride and they're kind of doing the same thing over there. So your economy is based on a tourism, and you don't want to like shoot yourself in the foot by over regulating it. I understand there are angry people that you've got to just be a good neighbor too. Like, that should be part of it. If you need to put explicit instructions for your guests to follow to be a good neighbor, then that should be in your instructions to your guest as a host. That's the host responsibility. I mean, if you guys are feeling like you need to do this so much, then maybe you've got a bunch of really bad hosts, or like people, I understand like party central happens when you're on vacation. And that's kind of the magic of being in those small towns. Living next door to it is not fun. I live next door to a piece of work here, but unfortunately it's all the time. So I don't know, just try not to hurt the people that are really, I mean, they're not all millionaires and like rolling in 4 homes, okay? It's their livelihood. And the more, yes, their insurance does go up when they're hosting short-term rentals, to answer somebody's question from earlier. So the homeowners, the hosts, they put a lot on their line, and, you know, they're not trying to go find the worst short-term people to go make noise and throw cigarette butts. They're just trying to make some money while they can, so that they're not just, you know, anyways, I guess that's my soapbox. Thank you for having this.
Thank you, Erin. Okay, we will go to Alyssa Aarons next. And you should.
Thank you. My name is Alyssa. I own Urbanize. We are one of the property management companies in the area for short-term rentals. I have seen kind of the processes that are going on, and I actually really do appreciate you guys putting these in place. We're seeing a lot of issues in Loveland who are not doing any regulations, and it's been really helpful to have these come about. I do think that there's kind of a step that's missing. A lot of the new people starting short-term rentals don't have the education on, you know, the small things that we're encountering in the county, like bears getting into the trash cans or the lights or whatever that situation may be. I think there could be some education that you guys could propose as far as like somebody who is actually in the nitty-gritty, like actually running these, giving some, you know, some classes or some education on how to be successful in what they're doing. So I know that there's another property manager in the area too that we're going to kind of, you know, brainstorm on some things that we can do to help. So just kind of throwing that out there for you too.
Great, thank you very much. All right, at this point, I'm looking to see if anybody has not made comments before. We are going to try to wrap up at 7:30. And so if anybody has not had a chance to make comments, please raise your hands. I don't see any new folks. I think we have a few minutes that we could potentially answer some of the questions that we've heard. Maybe not all of them. There are a number of questions in the chat or in the question box here. How do you feel about that, Ton and Matt and Amy, since we have a little bit of time? And then we'll see if anybody who hasn't commented, then we might have a few minutes at the end then if anybody else has a comment that they'd like to make.
I think that's fine. Some questions.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, let's do it. We'll see what we can cover. I don't think we should probably go through these in order necessarily because there's a lot of them. We should probably hit on the ones that we heard in the notes or some of the common questions that we're hearing over and over and see if we can answer some of those.
Okay. Right off the bat, I could answer the transferability question, if that's a one-time transfer, if it's in perpetuity. So the way the current proposed language would allow it, so if you have a currently approved or previously approved short-term rental, you could transfer the license, and it would be technically in perpetuity. So it would be the next property owner, or you can transfer the license to your if somebody like a child or somebody, grandchild, you could do that, but you can also, they could then transfer the license as well. If it was a new license, so after the adoption of the code, it would not be transferable. So hopefully that clarifies.
I can answer the question about septic and the water source. The septic is checked through the health department when the change of occupancy permit is submitted. So the Department of Health checks that and makes sure that even with the additional sleeping area, that the septic system is still sufficient to handle what it needs to handle. And then the water use is checked at the planning stage through one of the standards in there. So those things are checked prior to any kind of approval.
Okay, and then I can answer the question too. I think that about who these are applicable to. So to provide clarification, the new regulations would be applicable to new short-term rentals. So again, if you have a previously approved short-term rental, or if you are currently in the process of getting short-term rental approval, the new regulations would not be applicable. So for instance, if you did, I think it was Justin Stiles who went through floodplain review. So if you had gone through that process, moving forward, you were good to go since you're in the process. So anything that would change or possibly could change in the floodplain regulations, that would be for new short-term rentals moving forward. What else is here?
Just a piece of clarity on that, Ton. In
Mhm.
the floodplain, it used to be that we only limited short-term rentals from the floodway, which is the damage path of a flood. That has been expanded to include the flood fringe, which is the floodway plus the boundary of the remaining portion of the flood plain. So it's a larger area that's now being impacted. So that has changed slightly.
And then I do see a general question if there will be a transcript posted after the meeting. This is being recorded, so we will post that recording. I will also post the presentation, and then I will, after this, which it may take some time in the following week, but we generally summarize the comments that we've received, and we will get those summarized in a summary document, and that will also be posted. And then any of the questions that we can't address right now in the next few minutes, we will go through, and then hopefully the more common questions we will add to our frequently asked questions sheet that is online. So hopefully we can get generally most everything addressed through that process.
If I could answer one of the first questions that Cheryl posed. So Cheryl, each short-term rental is required to have an identified property manager that is responsible to take care of whatever the parties agree upon. So the property manager that I'm referring to has nothing to do with the Crystal Lakes property managers. So it's a one person identified per short-term rental or vacation home. So I hope that clarifies that piece for you.
Ton, you guys, if you don't mind, I'll speak real briefly to the differences of procedure. Talking about a special review versus an amended special review. Right now, the way it's proposed, we will have two different administrative special review processes. The first of the two, which is an administrative special review without an asterisk after it, is purely an administrative decision. So you'll submit an application, that application will be reviewed by staff, and ultimately the planning director at this point, which is Leslie Ellis, will take input from staff and whatnot and make a decision on the application. If at the time of decision, she feels uncomfortable with that decision or feels that there needs to be additional discussion as it relates to neighborhood comments or whatnot, she can escalate that to the Board of County Commissioners for a decision. So that's a standard administrative special review. Then we are adopting what we're calling an administrative special review with an asterisk after it. And the idea is it will receive the same level of review that all of them will go through, but it will require a mandatory hearing in front of the Board of County Commissioners for a decision. And then finally, there's a special review, which is just an S in that table. And a special review has a full review by staff, and then it is heard by the Planning Commission. And that Planning Commission then makes a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, and the Board of County Commissioners make a decision. So there's a little bit more scrutiny as you step up through each of those three processes.
Okay, and then I see a next question that says a little more clarification on the relationship between the late March commission meeting for adoption and then the early April date. So for clarity, so for the regulations, there would be two hearings. So there's the first hearing would be the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission provides a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. So that would be the first hearing. And then following that hearing, about a week and a half or a week later, would be the Board of County Commissioners hearing. So at that hearing, then the commissioners hear the same report and what have you, same staff report, and then they would, take public feedback as with the Planning Commission, and then they essentially they are the approving body. So they would approve the document, make modifications to the document, what have you. And then I think maybe there's some confusion about, I think on my timeline, I showed March and then April. The April was more directly related to the enforcement ordinance, as the ordinance may need some tweaking based upon what the Board of County Commissioners adopts. So if they make some slight modifications to the standards, that may have some effect of what is written or seen in the enforcement ordinance, and therefore it would need some tweaking. So that will be adopted later, and likely about, a month or a couple weeks, who's to say, but sometime just after the adoption of the actual short-term rental regulations. Hopefully that clarifies, makes sense. Let's see. And then there was a question about, can you define event space? So we have a separate use in our land use code for event spaces. They are defined or classified as an assembly use. So for instance, you cannot have a short-term rental that is also used for weddings. So you can't have a wedding party, of course, can stay there as a short-term rental, but you can't actually have the wedding event or a reception or what have you at the short-term rental. So that is clarification that it cannot be used as an event space, because that is a different use per our land use code. And then there is just a quick question about the HOA and that topic. So as I said, we did have some conversation and some requests by the public about some consideration of exemptions for certain HOAs that are in existence that support or encourage the use of short-term rentals. So for instance, there is a community in Estes Park, or the Estes Valley, Windcliff Estates. Their HOA very much is geared around, and their history is based around short-term renting or short-term rentals. It goes back some 50 years or thereabouts. And so they were requesting that there may be some consideration to exclude them from the short-term rental regulations, or some portion thereof. And so there has been ongoing conversation in how that would look if that was feasible. And so we are continuing to have those conversations with staff and looking at if it is possible to do that, and or what are some other options if it is not possible to provide an exclusion or exception outright. So there has been discussion that there likely may not be, but their option may be to rezone to a zoning district, such as in that particular case, accommodations, which would give them some more flexibility. So again, that's an ongoing conversation, and we hope to have more moving forward. So with that, I believe that's it is 7:30 on the dot, so I won't take up any more of your time. We do appreciate, again, all your great feedback throughout this entire process. We, again, will hope to address the questions that are still remaining in our frequently asked question sheet that is online on the project website. So again, you can find that website at larimer.gov/planning, and it's under our current projects tab. Pretty easy to find, short-term rentals. And there's a whole slew of information there. Again, if you would like to provide comments on the current public review draft number 2, that is open still until January 30th, which is Monday. And you can email me those comments at luc2020@larimer.org. So if Leslie, Matt, Amy, if you have anything else, but again, I extend our thanks again for joining us this evening and for your time in this process. So we do look forward to the final drafts, and we'll get those out ready here in the next few weeks. So again, thank you all. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Leslie. Everyone have a good night.
Good night.